Hey everyone, welcome back to this week's video. And so last week we talked about anxiety not being your enemy, and this week we're going to talk about anxiety being more like a compass and what it can show you that goes beyond simply signaling to you where your weaknesses lie. Okay, so today I'm going to tell you about what's called the hero myth. We're going to talk about Carl Jung and how he understood a process he would call individuation and how that relates to the hero myth and also to what we go through when we encounter our own anxiety. Okay, so today I'm going to talk to you about a story that's called the hero myth. We're going to talk about Carl Jung, a depth psychologist, and how he understood a process called individuation and how that relates to the hero myth, and also how that relates to ourselves whenever we encounter our own anxiety, and how anxiety can be a compass rather than merely a signal that shows us where our weaknesses lie or our shortcomings. So have fun with this video. I hope it's going to be informative and also entertaining for you. So let's start with the hero myth. So last week we talked about anxiety, and I said anxiety is not your enemy, but if you manage to accept these negative feelings that go along with anxiety, what you can find is that anxiety becomes readable, right? It actually tells you something rather than just making you feel uncomfortable. And so today we're going to talk about what that means in particular, and we're going to take it a little further. So there is a story, and I suppose most of you know this story one way or another, and this is called the hero myth. And so I'll just quickly get into what the hero myth tells us, and then we'll get to Jung and how he understands this process. Okay, so generally you have the protagonist, either male or female, and this protagonist lives inside like something that approximates like a comfort zone. It either is a city with a wall around, or maybe a garden with a fence around, but it's some sort of an area that's fenced off or closed off or separated from the outside. And so as long as the protagonist's in there, he's happy, everything's fine, and then something happens, it feels uncomfortable, and the protagonist is trying to put it away, trying to ignore it, trying not to hear it and to go on anyways. It becomes louder and louder up until a point where the protagonist is no longer able to push it away. And so the adventure begins. The protagonist has to leave the safe space, whether it's a city or a garden, and he has to venture out into like the dark forest, generally symbolizing the unknown, right? That which he doesn't know. And then when they go into this unknown, they'll, come to like a cave or a castle or some sort of place that's often also guarded by a dragon. The protagonist has to overcome his own, let's say, themes or topics and fight. In the end, he has to fight the dragon, save the treasure, save the princess, whatever. And as a consequence of this, he transforms. He changes, or she, right? And then after battling this dragon, after getting back the treasure, the hero returns back to the safe space. And so I suppose a lot of stories we know today incorporate this kind of structure, and that doesn't come from nowhere. This story has been told for like hundreds of thousands of years, and I suppose it's that kind of story because it's not merely science fiction, but it puts its finger on something that's really real for us at the end of the day. And that thing is what we call this hero myth. It is that we need, also us, for us in our lives. There is something like a dragon, there's something like a safe space, and there's something like the unknown. And we don't know what's inside the unknown. It might be only a little triggering or a little stressful, but it might just be like a big dragon that, has fatal consequences for us. So there's always this kind of notion that we don't really know what's coming, and we tend to make a dragon out of it. And so, just like in the story, there are times in our lives where, whether that's a calling or a need or a suffering out of which we ought to leave this safe space, we have to go out there and fight our own dragon, and then we come back changed, transformed as a consequence. So in that's the hero myth. And that is perhaps the most central human story there is. Okay, so let's talk about Carl Jung. So Carl Jung is a depth psychologist and a big contributor to this hero myth. And I quickly want to take you and show you how Jung understood this kind of process that we undergo, or that the protagonist undergoes in this hero myth. For Carl Jung, there's something that he calls the shadow. And the shadow are all those things that we do not like about us, that we suppress, truths that we don't want to see, parts of ourselves that we don't want to express. That's what Jung calls the shadow. And you can think of it as like your own shadow, where obviously you can turn your head and you can see your shadow, but generally a shadow is behind me. So generally I don't see my shadow. And that's the right place for all the things that we don't like about ourselves and that we don't grant to express or to be expressed. And so for Carl Jung, when you go out there into the unknown and you go into like the cave and you fight the monster, or you go into the castle and you fight the dragon, it isn't so much that there's a real task in the outside world for us, but more so that the things we encounter out there are or is our own shadow. So it's the part of me that I don't incorporate. It's the parts of me that I don't accept. It's the parts of me that I don't like. It's the parts of me that I don't even like to know about, right? Best case, I simply forget about them and I can go on living my life pretending they're not there. But Jung says when you go out there, what the hero myth tells us is somebody going out there and confronting the parts of himself or herself that we don't like to see. And he calls this process individuation. And individuation, it isn't so often, it's not about becoming stronger. It's not about becoming better or faster or more efficient or anything like that. Individuation is about becoming more fully. So you can think of the shadow as a space where you put things of yourself that you don't like to see, but they belong to you anyways, or either way. And so by not seeing them, you're simply excluding parts of yourself. It's not like they aren't really there. And so when you include them, right? When you integrate them into yourself, when you go out there, you see them, you deal with them, and you make them your own again, then you don't become stronger or whatever, but you become more fully, right? And that's what Jung is trying to tell us with this process of individuation. So you could think of a person, for example, that has great difficulties with expressing anger, for example, right? So in my experience, a lot of people have difficulties expressing anger, and either it's this sort of holding back the anger, right? Like how do you say, swallowing it, right? You just take it up and you put it down there, and you wait for it to, basically we wait for it to explode. And then at some point this anger, right? There's a trigger, and then all of this anger comes up, and there's this great wave of anger, and then afterwards we feel ashamed. And so if you look at this from the perspective of individuation, we'd say that anger as let's say like a construct, isn't integrated into the person. Perhaps showing anger in the past for this person has been associated with great costs. Maybe people around him weren't really able to hold out or to be present when someone else is angry. And so whenever this person showed anger, it was suppressed right away. Like, don't do that. That's not good. And so we learn we can't show anger. And then anger is being put into the shadow where it's still there, like underneath, right? But we don't express it. And so what could a hero myth mean for a person as such, right? If you're dealing with like anger and it's just showing up like very like intensely, anger itself isn't the problem, and also expressing anger isn't the problem. I'd even go as far and say like there's different types of anger and also aggression, wherein you could say a part of this anger is reactive, right? If someone oversteps my boundaries, I can use anger to express that there is a boundary, and usually what a no means is if you keep doing what you're doing, there will be consequences that you don't want to be, right? And so, and this kind of aggression, it isn't malevolent. It's not that someone's intently being like mean, but someone is taking care and protecting their own boundaries. So that's, I would say, a natural and also an important form of aggression, right? That can help me. And then also there's the other types of aggression, like this destructive aggression, right? Where my goal is not to like implement my boundaries, but where my goal is to simply have as much destruction as I can. And so the process of individuation in this example would be to become or to create a relationship between me and my anger, to understand like anger itself is not the problem, and the expression of anger also isn't, but mainly how I deal and how I sort of view the expression of anger. My form, or this person's form of individuation, or the task that would go along with this would look like getting in touch with your anger, right? Be angry and don't feel ashamed about it. Okay? So my point being, in terms of Jung's perspective, the task is to integrate anger, to integrate this feeling of aggression and to have an outlet for it that's neither harmful nor unhealthy. And so I hope you understand that if that person would integrate their anger, right, they wouldn't become better or stronger. What they would become is more fully. And what was there has been there before as well. The difference is that the person integrated this into their self-structure. Okay, so now you know about the hero myth, you know about Carl Jung, you know about individuation, and the process of becoming more fully myself. And so let's connect this with last week's topic. We were talking about anxiety as a signal. Now, this week, looking at Jung's perspective, we could even take it a step further and say anxiety doesn't just show you something or that it's meaningful, But anxiety is even giving you a direction. And this direction, so Jung once said, the thing you most need to find will be found where you least want to look. Or the thing you most need will be found where you least want to look. I suppose that's more like it. And there's something very meaningful in this saying. Like, anxiety is a signal, yes. And what you find there is meaningful, yes. But it also is the thing that would have the most benefit for you if you learned it. Yeah, I'll say it again. Anxiety isn't just something that's dangerous and that feels uncomfortable. Anxiety points you exactly to the thing where the information lies, where the skill lie that you would most dearly need to learn to overcome whatever the thing is that you're battling with. And obviously, like, let me take a step back. Obviously, anxiety, first and foremost, is an emotion, and this emotion is supposed to signal danger to us. So there are rational fears, and anxiety is the thing that helps me jump away from like an oncoming car. And it's very good that anxiety is there. Anxiety is also the thing that makes me tense up when I'm climbing in a tree and I know I'm really high, and if I slip, it might be dangerous. So it signals danger. That's okay. I'm not saying that's not true. But those fears that are recurrent, that come and that limit or that influence my life and that make me live my life a certain way, if they're irrational fears, then if what Carl Jung says is correct, that means that you should have a look, because what you can find there is your treasure. It's your princess or whatever, right? There is the thing that you would most need to learn in order to individuate, to become more fully. And being a human isn't about becoming better and better and better all the time, but it's about becoming more fully. All right, so let's come to the heart of this talk today. Let's talk about a misunderstanding that often happens when people hear the hero myth. So often, the hero myth is understood as like a success story, right? You go out, you confront the dragon, you have to be tough and hard and disciplined and you need willpower, and then you become stronger. But this isn't really what happens. The hero that goes out and that fights the dragon, the treasure he brings home or she brings home isn't really like the sword or the treasure itself, like the gold. What happens there is that the hero changes as a consequence of this fight. Like, the experience itself changes the person. And so what a lot of people don't want to hear is that change hurts. And it doesn't hurt necessarily because it's painful, but because this experience, it changes you. And the person that goes into this experience isn't the same person that comes out of this experience at the other end. The difference between those two people, or let's say personas, is that through this experience, your old self and all the things that are no longer eligible, that do no longer serve you, they had to die. And who comes out at the other end is this refined version. And this refined version isn't better. As I said, it's not stronger, faster, these or that. It's more fully. And it hurts. It really hurts to let go parts of yourself that no longer serve you. But it seems that is the central human story. And that means that not only you and I and all of us today have this kind of narrative in our lives, but it also means that like all lived lives had this kind of narrative in their lives, and probably all future lives will have it as a theme in their lives. Okay, let's come to an end. And so at its core, what do I want to tell you with this video? If you face your anxiety, if you confront one way or another, you're not becoming stronger, you're becoming more fully. And so that means, whenever we deal with uncomfortable situations in our lives, whenever we deal with feelings of, doubt, uncertainty, nervousness, stressfulness, even anxiety, then the point when we deal with these feelings isn't to not have them anymore. It isn't to be able to control my anxiety. It isn't so that I want to become fearless. It's nothing you want to be. What you want is to be able to hold out that feeling, to listen to it, to go where it points you, and to learn what is there to learn for you. And I suppose one way or another, that's a story, or maybe the adventure of your life, to live your own hero myth, to fight those dragons, and to continuously change as a consequence, but not meaninglessly, but to continually become ever more of who you were supposed to become more fully you. Okay, so to end this video today, thank you guys for watching. As I said in the beginning, I hope it was informative and entertaining to you, and I'll see you next video.